Hey folks, I'm Kurt Indovina, and today we're talking about Elder Scrolls Online's new expansion, Greymoor, and joining me is the creative director, Rich Lambert. Rich, pleasure to have you. Glad you're here. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I just want to first jump into that Elder Scrolls Online has consistently been expanding and adding places over, what is it, since 2014 now? Congratulations on that, this ever-expanding universe.
6 years.
We've had the opportunity to see areas of Tamriel, new and both old, expanded in different ways. When it came to Greymoor, what was the decision specifically to return to Skyrim this time around? And what was that process in taking it back in time on the western side of things?
A lot of what we do when we're thinking about the next chapter and where we're going to go next is kind of looking in the past and what we've done before. And so when you look at what we did with Elsewhere, it was, kind of desert, and the Khajiit aren't silly, but it was a little bit more happy-go-lucky. They're a different culture. And so we wanted to make sure that we told a story that felt very different and go to a different location. And we couldn't think of anything more kind of opposite than Elsewhere than going to Skyrim and exploring the north.
From the sands to the winter.
Yeah.
Now, already Elder Scrolls, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tamriel Unlimited, it mostly takes place in the second era, and Skyrim takes place in the third, like the end of the third era. Is that correct?
Oh boy! So Skyrim, I think, is actually the fourth era. It's almost 1,000 years ahead of where we are in ESO's timeline. It gives us a lot of opportunities to really explore things that we probably couldn't necessarily explore in the fourth era.
When it came to that, those decisions, like Skyrim is near and dear to, I think, a lot of us, and me especially. So what were some of the challenges you faced when adapting Western Skyrim again, especially in, 1,000 years in the past?
I think the big thing is just player expectation. When you say, hey, we're going to Western Skyrim, people instantly know, oh, Solitude, oh, I'm going here, I'm going to explore this kind of stuff. And so trying to manage that and balance that kind of whole, how much nostalgia, how much familiarity do we put in versus new stuff. And I think with Greymoor, we've really found that balance where the overland areas, being able to go and explore Skyrim and going into Solitude and seeing Dragon Bridge, those kind of things are very, very familiar to players. They kind of feel like home. And where we really forged our own path and kind of went our own way was when you went down into Blackreach. And that's where we got to show you things that you've never seen before in Skyrim. Was
it difficult for you, like when it came to making those decisions and trying to hone in and keep something like Solitude a certain way that is familiar to players, but then also was there any push and pull from a creative side of wanting to do something different, of wanting to change it in any way?
Sure. I mean, we always kind of want to go off and do our own things and tell our own stories. I mean, you can't really top Skyrim, right? Like, that's pretty much the masterpiece right there. So how do we do our own things? And fortunately, we've been doing this for a while. We've gone to a few really iconic locations over the years, and so we've been able to kind of figure out a good process for that.
Thankfully, Skyrim has some dark, moody, history in of itself. At what point was it always something you wanted to do when returning and leaning really heavily into vampirism, as Dawnguard and all those things are so heavily ingrained? Was it always something you knew you wanted to do from the start?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to the how do we tell a completely opposite story than what we just did. And a lot of times what we do, Matt is the game director, Matt Firer, when we're coming up with kind of ideas, initial kind of concepts for the next chapter or the next area, a lot of times we just throw one word back and forth at each other just to kind of establish mood and feel. So with Morrowind, it was nostalgia was the word. And with Somerset, it was high fantasy. That was the word that kind of carried it through and could really help the teams really grasp what the story was that we're trying to tell. With Elsewhere, it was revenge, dragons and revenge. And so it was a revenge-based story. And with Greymoor, it was Gothic. That was the thing. We wanted to tell this dark Gothic story because that was the antithesis of the Khajiit and kind of the lighthearted story. Even though it was about revenge, it kind of came across as a little bit more lighthearted.
And kind of going from elsewhere into Greymoor, what has it been like? You've been with the game since 2007, you said earlier, correct? What has it been like to see this game evolve over time through ups and downs, and then into kind of like finding what I think the best identity that the game has currently? What was that like?
Well, I will say it was trying early on. We didn't have the best of launches with PC, but really I'm super proud of what we've been able to do and super proud of the team. We didn't give up. We knew we had a good core game, and so kind of going through and trying to really figure out what the essence of Elder Scrolls was. I actually worked on Oblivion. That was the first game that I worked on when I joined Bethesda. Being able to kind of see the game, Elder Scrolls Online, go from not quite knowing what it is, is it an MMO, is it an RPG, to kind of knowing and absolutely understanding what it is and what makes Elder Scrolls an Elder Scrolls game, has been super fulfilling. And I think the players have definitely noticed that and definitely commented on that over the years as well. Is the game feels like an Elder Scrolls game, which is just amazing praise for us at Sauce.
I don't have the time for MMOs anymore than the way I used to, and I feel like Elder Scrolls Online kind of created that happy balance of feeling as though I'm surrounded around other people, feeling that I'm involved with things that are happening, that people are on their own quests around me, but still following along in what feels like a traditional Elder Scrolls storyline or quest line in some ways. And so it's good work. It's basically what I'm saying as a player, that I think that's great.
It's cool to be able to play an MMO solo if you want to, or you can play with friends, right? Like it's nice having that freedom.
So going forward, you've been with this for so long. You've seen it in so many different ways. Is there how do you envision ESO growing and expanding in the future? Now, I know that's a broad question and might allude to things you may not be able to talk about. But what, like in your own fantasy world, like kind of what do you want to see with ESO happen?
I think you can kind of tell what we're working towards if you kind of follow the updates and how we've been working through. So we're slowly filling the map of Tamriel out. We still have a number of places that we can go and explore, but there's also the Plains of Oblivion. It's a huge, massive world. So once we do get to that point of kind of filling up Tamriel, there's no shortage of places we can go and can explore. But I think the big thing is we're not going to slow down. Like, people love the update cadence that we have. It's hard on the team. We do quarterly updates. I don't really think anybody does that the way we do in the business, and we have been doing it for 5 years now. Greymoor was our 26th update to the game in almost 6 years. So that's a lot over the course. And it's definitely one of the reasons why I think ESO is where it is today, is because we're constantly updating the game and players always have something new to come back to.
And speaking of the players, how much of the community do you feel the playership that really kind of guides what it is your creative vision, especially as the creative director of the game?
They're a big part of what we do. We get obviously lots of /feedback. There's an in-game tool that players can type in feedback requests and things into the game. Social media is a big thing. Twitch, I'm in Twitch streams all the time, just kind of watching what players are doing, listening to kind of what they're doing, and it has a big impact on kind of what we do and where we kind of set our sights next.
One thing I personally appreciate about Elder Scrolls Online is that regardless of where you come into the game, it is quite approachable in the sense that it feels like it's designed in a way that I can play solo and that I can play with a group of people. And then you have these very specific quest lines that evolve on their own and tell a specific story. In this case, Greymoor adds vampirism and antiquities and all of these kind of other additional things. How did you continue to make Greymoor approachable, say, if this was the first time I would be getting into Elder Scrolls Online?
I think the big thing with that is just kind of the way the game is structured. Like you mentioned, it's approachable. We don't have arbitrary level gates that prevent you from going and exploring the world. You can go anywhere. You can play with anybody. You don't have to spend 2 years leveling up through all the older content in order to come to the new stuff. You can just jump in and play right away. So that right there is instantly approachable. And then I think the other thing that we do extremely well with Greymoor and on all our chapters really is NPCs in the world recognize your exploits. And so if you've done things with them in the past, they have a different set of greetings and will be and act slightly different than if you've never been there before. So it reinforces to the player, that all of the stuff they've done over the years, matters. And really that helps make the world feel more believable and more alive. And then when it comes to, you mentioned antiquities, I think this is a thing that we've never done before. And this is kind of it's not questing, it's not killing, it's kind of a new way to play the game. And players who aren't necessarily familiar with MMOs or familiar with RPGs, it gives them that kind of familiar, mini game style of gameplay that they can kind of get in and dig into and understand and learn more about what the lore in the world is, which helps them overall in their journey through the world.
And something you said about NPCs acknowledging and remembering things that you did. This one, you can become a vampire, and it's a big sole focus of those decisions you make, and almost in the essence of being a vampire, you're going to have to make decisions to continue being a vampire. What was that like? Giving a player the ability to kind of put themselves in a line of danger with NPCs, with guards and stuff like that, that maybe wasn't as otherwise as much of a focal point in previous expansions.
Vampires, we've had the vampire skill line in the game really since launch, but it wasn't a full experience. It was really ultimately a couple of passive abilities and maybe an active ability that you would use. But for the most part, it was this passive thing. You did it, you just got more power. When we started working on Greymoor, when we really figured out what the story was and how it was going to be centrally focused on this vampire storyline, we wanted to take the time to update vampires for players so that they could feel like they were a vampire. And part of that was, integrating that into the justice system. So if you do vampiric things near NPCs in the world, they will react, and they will react very strongly and not like that. But also just how you feed, how you gain power. Now you have to actually participate in the skill line and participate in feeding to gain more power. And that really turns it into this full experience and makes it so that the players, do feel like they're part of the world, but also feel like they are being a vampire, which is cool.
So last thing, we've touched a lot about antiquities and vampirism and kind of these different new elements or developed elements. But what is it like the key thing that you really think makes Greymoor different from the previous expansions that would provoke players to go all in and explore Greymoor?
Well, it's Skyrim. So you can go in and explore this familiar place, but it's slightly different. It's 1,000 years in the past, but it is also our darkest story that we've told. It's very different than kind of the themes that we've touched on in the past. And so if you want that kind of little bit of nostalgia of, exploring and learning more about the world that you're so familiar with and the area you're so familiar with, it's the perfect opportunity to jump in and start playing.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Rich, thank you so much for being here. While you're here for this moment, say your thing. Do the thing you got to do. Tell us, is Greymoor available? Can we play it now?
Yeah, Greymoor is available pretty much on everything. So we just launched on Stadia yesterday. It's on console, it's on PC, Mac. So yeah, it's out there. It's full out there. Pretty much anything you want to play on, you can go and play it on now.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Rich. Truly. Once more, I'm Kurt Indovina. This is GameSpot, and for any other Elder Scrolls Online or Greymoor news, make sure to come back here to check it out. All right, till next time, see you later.